Hello and welcome to the second episode of Abhivachan series in English in collaboration with Atlantic Films. We have been reading Ruskin Bond stories and today's story is The Tree Lover. I was never able to get over the feeling that plants and trees loved grandfather with as much tenderness as he loved them. I was sitting beside him on the veranda steps one morning when I noticed the tendril of a creeping vine that was trailing near my feet. As we sat there in the soft sunshine of a North Indian winter, I saw that the tendril was moving very slowly away from me and towards grandfather. 20 minutes later, it had crossed the veranda step and was touching grandfather's feet. There is probably a scientific explanation for this plant's behavior, something to do with light and warmth. But I like to think that it moved that way simply because it was fond of my grandfather. One felt like drawing close to him. Sometimes when I sat alone beneath a tree, I would feel a little lonely or lost. But as soon as grandfather joined me, the garden would become a happy place. The tree itself more friendly. Grandfather had served many years in the Indian Forest Service, and so it was natural that he should know and understand and like trees. On his retirement from the service, he had built a bungalow on the outskirts of Dehra, planting trees all around it. Limes, mangoes, oranges and guavas, also eucalyptus, jacaranda and the Persian lilac. In the fertile dune valley, plants and trees grew tall and strong. There were other trees in the compound before the house was built, including an old peepal tree which had forced its way through the walls of an abandoned outhouse, knocking the bricks down with its vigorous growth. Peepal trees are great show-offs. Even when there is no breeze, their broad-chested, slim-waisted leaves will spin like tops, determined to attract your attention and invite you into the shade. My grandmother had wanted the peepal tree cut down, but grandfather said, "Let it be. We can always build another outhouse." My grandfather wasn't content with planting trees in our own garden. During the rains, we would walk into the jungle beyond the riverbed, armed with cuttings and saplings, and these we would plant in the forest beside the tall sal and shisham trees. "But no one ever comes here," I protested the first time we did this. "Who is going to see them?" "We are not planting for people only," said grandfather. "We are planting for the forest and for the birds and animals who live here and need more food and shelter." He told me how men, and not only birds and animals, needed trees for keeping the desert away, for attracting rain, for preventing the banks of rivers from being washed away, and for wild plants and grasses to grow beneath. "And for timber?" I asked, pointing to the sal and shisham trees. "Yes, and for timber. But men are cutting down the trees without replacing them. For every tree that's felled, we must plant two. Otherwise, one day, there will be no forests at all, and the world will become one great desert." The thought of a world without trees became a sort of nightmare for me. It's one reason why I shall never want to live on the treeless moon. So, I helped grandfather in his tree planting with even greater enthusiasm. He also taught me a poem by George Morris, and we would recite it together. "Woodman, spare that tree. Woodman, spare that tree. Touch not a single bough. Touch not a single bough. In youth it sheltered me. In youth it sheltered me, and I will protect it now. And I will protect it now. One day the trees will move again," said grandfather. "They have been standing still for thousands of years, but one day they will move again. There was a time when trees could walk about like people, but along came the devil and cast a spell over them, rooting them to one place. But they are always trying to move. See how they reach out with their arms. And some of them, like the banyan tree, with its traveling roots, managed to get quite far. When I finished the school, I too went to England with my parents and was away from India for several years. But recently I was in Dehra again, and after first visiting the old house, where I found that the banyan tree had grown over the wall and along part of the pavement, almost as though it had tried to follow my grandfather. I walked out of town towards the riverbed. It was February, and as I looked across the dry watercourse, my eye was caught by the spectacular red plumes of the coral blossom. In contrast to the dry riverbed, the island was a small green paradise. When I walked across to the trees, I noticed the number of squirrels had come to live in them, and a koel challenged me with a mellow, "Who are you? Who are you?" But the trees seemed to know me. They whispered among themselves and beckoned me nearer. And looking around, I noticed that other small trees and wild plants and grasses had sprung under the protection of the trees we had placed there. The trees had multiplied. They were moving. In one small corner of the world, grandfather's dream was coming true, and the trees were moving again. Wow. Such a wonderful expression, such a wonderful feeling, isn't it? Even I love trees. So I would like to mention that please read this story because I have just read some part of it. You have to experience this story entirely. And I want to emphasize on one more thing, that please love our trees. They are our lives. Now we will say that we live in metropolitan city, we don't have time, we don't have space. But come on, when we start loving something, we always find some solution for all the problems. So there are solutions. Let's plant some small plants in our windows or garden area or gallery or veranda somewhere. Maybe some herbs, basil or some flower plants, something. In few days I'm sure you'll start loving them, and then you will find the solutions. There are organizations which help us plant trees, preserve trees, and we can go and actually plant the trees with our own hands, or we can contribute in their work and preserve our jungles, our big trees in all over the world. So let's start loving trees and let grandfather's dream come true and the entire earth be a green paradise. For such wonderful and lovely stories, let's meet again in the next episode. Till the time, bye bye.